Hello, I'm Bernard Combe from the UNESCO section on Education for Sustainable Development. I'm also the co-lead for the UNESCO Intersectoral Program on Advancing Scientific and Environmental Education for a Sustainable and Resilient Society, also known as IP2. I will introduce a few updates on what is happening in terms of education for sustainable development, and then zoom into the developments around this intersectoral program. We all have to keep in mind that all environmental issues are connected and interconnected, and that they are linked to our future and our actions. We also have to take into account that we need to also include indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, the abilities of integrating policies, programs, different points of view in all the actions we take. And clearly for us, education is key to both environmental and climate action, as well as biodiversity action. So what does the Education for Sustainable Development section at UNESCO do in terms of supporting UNESCO's ESD approach? We support member states in improving the relevance and the approach to education for sustainable development, and to provide opportunities to further develop and enhance approaching and addressing the various global issues we are faced with. How do we do that? We do it through leading and coordinating the global processes and participating in them, whether it's the climate discussion, the biodiversity discussion, the ocean discussions. Then it's also about providing guidance, technical support, recommendations for implementing at country level. And finally, it's also about monitoring and evaluating what is being done and how can we better influence advocacy, policy, and practice. We have two key frameworks, being the ESD for 2030 framework and its roadmap, which focuses on 5 priority action areas. The policy area, where we need to better integrate education into sustainability policies and sustainability into education policies. The learning methods, learning environment, where we need to ensure that we take a whole institution approach. Educators and teachers, providing better capacity development. Youth, empowering youth, engaging youth, and providing them with opportunities for participating. And finally, community, local level, actions at the local level, which is clearly where we can make a clear difference, and this is where UNESCO sites come in particular. However, when we look at national curriculums around the world, we see that not everything is well yet. Only 1/5 of countries include biodiversity in their school textbooks. Only half mention climate change. We've also carried out some surveys of teachers, and only basically a quarter of teachers, only a quarter of them can explain well how to take action on climate. We also surveyed young people who called for better quality climate change education. In particular, during prior and during the Transforming Education Summit, where one of the outcomes of the summit is what is called the Greening Education Partnership, which is a global level initiative to deliver better coordinated, collaborative actions on climate change education and making sure that it's linked to lifelong learning. and making sure that climate change is mainstreamed, integrated into all countries' education system. So a little bit more about this Greening Education Partnership, which brings together both member states, countries. So 97 countries are currently member. We have 11 UN agencies and more than 1,600 organizations participating in this partnership, which focuses on 4 action areas. One is greening schools, making sure that sustainability and climate is integrated into all aspects of schools. Greening curriculum, the same thing, integrating that into curriculum. Then of course we need to green teacher training, but also green the education system itself. And then finally, greening communities, where again, the activities we carry out with and for and within UNESCO sites are key. So as I said, we have 11 UN agencies part of the partnership, and they have each action area as a working group led by various organizations. Some are UN agencies, some are major NGOs. And these working groups have been working to come to a common understanding of what does it mean to green schools, to green curriculum, to green teacher education and education system, to green communities. And last year, 2 guidance documents were released. One on greening schools, i.e. developing green schools quality standards, and then one on greening curriculum, providing guidance on what should be included in the curriculum. And we feel that as both climate resilient schools, but also climate resilient communities will make a difference as we face the current environmental crisis. A lot of what is integrated in these greening actions or greening initiatives comes from the results of a youth survey. More than 17,000 young people were asked about what is quality change education, climate change education, and they came up with these 8 demands or recommendations. In particular, the issue that education should be experiential, learner-centered, it should be solution-based, action-oriented, that teachers need support, that schools are important learning spaces, that there needs to be more contextualized education with engaging the local communities, and that the various specificities of geography, demography, biodiversity need to be addressed. I mentioned that we are advocating for whole institution, whole school approaches, meaning that climate action is not just for a class on climate, a science education class, but should be part of the school governance, the teaching, the learning, the partnerships that with the local community, but also the operations and facilities of the school itself. The issues of procurement, the issues of is there a green space at the school? Is there rainwater harvesting? It's all about making sure that ESD, climate change, environmental issues permeate, seep into all activities, all areas of schools, and that it's important to connect all these to have a more successful impact. Another process into which we are involved is the issue of outdoor learning, greening school grounds, because so many schools still have courtyards that are cement, that if you turn those into green spaces, both you will address climate resilience and ensure that the temperatures are a bit lower, but also you will promote better connection with nature within urban spaces. We are also involved with the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration and have joined the Foundation for Environmental Education and the North American Association for Environmental Education to take on an education challenge focusing on embedding ecosystem restoration into education systems, education programs, to ensure that learners have a better idea of how to restore ecosystems and protect biodiversity. And that we also need to keep in mind that we are also talking about the marine environment, not just the terrestrial environment. We, as you all know, UNESCO has a number of facilities and networks of sites, and we have to build on this great opportunity. We also have several networks of young people working on UNESCO issues, and we have to make sure we bring them into our activities. We need to also better understand how we affect nature and how nature affects us. And so in terms of this intersectoral program working with UNESCO sites, we have defined a number of activities, in particular the importance of identifying schools and sites, but also requires training. It requires providing materials adapted to the local situation. It requires also looking at how to upscale, how to replicate those activities elsewhere. And the focus really is on UNESCO sites as education, learning hubs for sustainability, including also making the connections to renewable energy, water issues, and many others. This is an intersectoral program led by the education sector, the natural science sector, and the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission to develop a methodology to use UNESCO sites in teaching and learning about environment, climate, and other sustainability issues. We have so far working with 84 UNESCO sites in 64 countries. We have been able to, through the field offices, mobilize other projects that have related activities and bring in funds. We have been able to inform the discussions on education during the climate negotiation and the biodiversity negotiations. And as I mentioned, we are contributing, for instance, to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So this year we will be continuing to support the 17 field offices we are working with, as well as other field offices. We will be advocating the key important value of using UNESCO sites as educational hubs. We have developed last year, we have finalizing an implementation guides full of activities and examples, and we'll be starting to collect stories. In summary, what we are trying to do is to promote, activate environmental learning and action at the local level, but connecting to the global level, and vice versa, bringing the global issues to the local level with the help of UNESCO sites, schools, museums, and other actors. And ensuring that there's a clear, let's say, in the field experience, in the field interaction between schools and UNESCO sites. This is also part of responding to a decision that came out of the COP on biodiversity, where UNESCO is being invited with IPBES and Gibbon, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network to collaborate to develop a global plan of action on education for biodiversity. So a few words about this implementation guide. It covers UNESCO sites and proposes various activities. On-site experiential immersive activities, for instance, what are called amazing places projects. These are places where you probably would put it on Instagram because they seem to be so great and so exciting. It's also about intergenerational education activities. For instance, environmental history and memoirs, talking to older people that have lived in UNESCO sites to see how things have changed over the years. For instance, looking at how the lakes have gotten either bigger or smaller. It's about making sure that you have inclusive educational activities, bringing in the issues of storytelling, folk tales. There are so many folk tales and stories about water and the fairies that are in the water, whether they're bad or good, or that they explain why certain things are done in certain ways in terms of saving water, for instance. It's also about observation and research, cleaning up a river, finding out what grows in it or what lives in it. It's about, of course, capacity building and restoration activities, in particular those that engage communities and get, in particular, the ones led by young people. It's also about cultural and creative activities, notably for instance, linking schools among UNESCO sites. It's a great way for schools to twin and exchange among each other and to get to know UNESCO sites in a better way. It's also about co-learning, partnership, and exchange activities. Notably, for instance, elaborating joint inter-site activities, several sites working together on similar activities, creating trails of these sites. For instance, this is what has happened in Scotland. Scotland has a trail of UNESCO, in particular UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And learning more how to put in common activities. So, what is important? Basically, this proverb captures it. If you don't know where you come from, you can't know where you're going. This also applies to water. If you don't know where your water comes from, you don't know what you should do to protect it. So it's important that we remember that as we approach education for sustainable development. We have set up a web page for the intersectoral program, which we are starting to populate with some videos of some activities in various UNESCO sites. Because it's all about making sure that people are empowered to think differently, act differently, so that we can create a better future for all of us. We have launched a call for stories, experiences in UNESCO sites, and of how learning activities, lifelong learning activities, have changed how people see those sites. Because basically, to quote Saint-Exupéry, the one who wrote The Little Prince, in life they are no solution. They are only motive forces, and our task is to set them acting, and then the solution will follow. Basically, we need to bring ourselves together to exchange and to come up with solutions together. Thank you very much, and I hope this has provided some very quick insights into some of the activities we do in terms of ESD in UNESCO sites. Thank you again.